Hello and welcome to another Frackin' podcast. I am Dan and I'm here with my co-hosts Marty
Hello.
and Joseph.
Hi.
If you're joining us for the first time, welcome. If you're tuning in again, thank you so much. We are so glad to have you here. Today's episode, I am super excited about. This is episode 5, Dynamic Duos, and we'll be discussing some of our favorite duos that are great on their own, but they're better together. And this was hard. Again, we had way too many ideas and we had to make some tough calls.
We did. So I think the first one is going to be kind of fun, and it actually encompasses a few different character duos besides just these two. And this is the one.
Frodo
I love
Baggins
them
and
so much.
Samwise Gamgee. Fantastic. Great choice.
Yeah. Yep.
I was definitely watching some Lord of the Rings last night. Not even as research, just because I love that movie. Look how their
They're just
journey is
so
so
awesome.
beautiful.
I think it's great too because I think a lot of times when you think of dynamic duos, you think of like the superhero dynamic duo, you think of like Batman and Robin, that kind of thing. You don't really think about just friendships and friendships of people who are basically on equal terms. And I think that's an exciting like combination that you don't see really very often in film, television, or literature, really. Just the straight,
Yeah.
I feel bad saying straight friendship, but like just a real friendship, right? A true
It's a
friendship.
pure. Yeah, it's super pure. And you say equal, and they really are equal, but in Sam's mind, he's not necessarily equal. He always looks up to the Baggins family.
I think
And
you have that in friendships though, right? I mean, even if
yeah,
I think about my friendships with people, like I have that with some friends as well. Like some of my closest friends where I think, man, like they're so much better than me. But like on the surface, like, no, I think, we're probably the same.
yeah. I think what's so lovely about this is that it is just this really healthy friendship where even though Sam looks up to Frodo, Frodo just treats him like a brother, pretty much. He cares for him. There's definitely respect there at the beginning, but then towards the end, it is just such a deeper friendship. An amazing one too, like just pure, and it kind of shows like you can have this amazing love for another person, platonic love for another person, where you're like risking your life for this person because he's your friend or she's your friend or they're your friend. And I don't know, it's just amazing.
They make
And you
me
kind of
so
see,
happy.
well, yeah.
They're just like they have like utter devotion for each other. And it's something we see a lot in relationships when we see these relationships in film and television and books, where they're like, oh, this is so cute. They're utterly devoted. And, I understand why people sometimes want to ship them. I really do. But to me, like, I've had friendships like this. Like, this is just, I'm going to do whatever, like, I can to make your life easier.
I think my favorite thing about this particular friendship, and I think we'll see this a little bit later with a couple other duos that we've chosen, but this one in particular, the fact that Frodo is the clear protagonist of the story that we're seeing, and in the beginning, it seems like Sam isn't really up to the task of supporting Frodo in the way that he might need it, but by the end of the series, Sam really comes out as the character who is actually stronger in his emotions, in his ability to understand what's going on, in his support, his devotion, like you said, Van. Like, he is the stronger of the two characters. And I think that's a really interesting arc to see on screen.
He is so much more powerful than even these like mythical kings of old who were not corrupted by the ring, who were corrupted by the ring, and he was not. Right? Like he went through this whole thing. He even held on to the ring when he thought Frodo was dead to continue that mission. And not at one point was he ever tempted by that evil. Like he was just so pure of heart. And there's a lot behind that. Like Tolkien had a very pessimistic view of modern society, and so Sam was this country bumpkin character that represented this like agricultural ideal that Tolkien really loved. And you could get into that a little bit if you really wanted to. But the point is, like, this was the purest character throughout the entire series because the elves were all tempted, right? Galadriel, famously in that scene, whether you read it or you saw it in the movies, was super tempted by the ring. Now, she didn't succumb to it, and Frodo didn't really, I mean, kind of did succumb a little bit towards the end, but was saved by Sam. But I just think it's amazing that, when you first are introduced to these characters, Sam just seems like, oh yeah, he's kind of that weird friend who's like socially awkward. And I mean, I really kind of love that about the entire story because this like socially awkward, uncomfortable, like insecure character turns out to be the most important character in the books and in the movies.
I mean, it's clear without him, the entire journey would not have succeeded.
Absolutely.
Right. And the fact that he like wasn't even supposed to be going with Frodo to begin with and just decided to do it on his own and wouldn't listen to no, I think was amazing.
And the fact that everybody else really doubted him. I mean, they doubted both of them, but they doubted that Sam would be strong enough to keep Frodo going and then to be able to prove, all these other characters wrong. And it's nice. I really like the fact that he wasn't a sidekick.
No,
he definitely was not a sidekick. Which in itself is kind of amazing. No, I just really love this dynamic, this duo.
Yeah. I think too, and we'll talk about this later with somebody else, I think, but just also the fact that it's like a male friendship, like an equal, honest, but real friendship where there really doesn't seem to be a lot of competition between the two of them. Because a lot of times in TV shows, you get like two male characters that are friends, that are close, but there's something between them. There's some kind of competition element between them, whether it's a career thing or a family thing or a love interest. And here it really is a true friendship.
Yeah.
I love that.
They're so perfect.
Are we moving on?
I mean, I could sit and talk about them forever, and that's fine. But I think maybe we could move on.
Yeah, and I was so caught up with that picture, I forgot to like expand us, but that's okay. That's totally fine. Totally fine.
I did not mind staring at Frodo and Sam for a little bit.
I think it's a great place to start.
My heart happy.
It's a great place to start because I think everybody that follows afterwards, we get a little bit more eccentric with the relationships. So,
eccentric would be one word for it.
Yeah, moving straight into eccentric with Julian and Garrick. I love them. I love them so much because they are an unlikely friendship. You would think these two have nothing in common. They are not going to be able to be friends. This is just never going to work. But they are. They are friends.
Yeah, this is one of my favorite television like duos of all time because I feel like, the whole time we're watching them, we don't really know whether this is a friendship or not until the very end. I mean, we get inklings and we want to believe that this is a real, honest friendship. But because of the nature of Garrick's character, he really keeps us on our toes as viewers, questioning whether or not is it a friendship? Is this part of his espionage? Is it something more than a friendship? And the dynamic between the two actors was just so
beautiful.
Yeah, it was perfect.
It really was, and it's like first season perfect because it's like this young doctor who's, honestly, like Bashir annoyed me first season.
Oh,
He was just like super arrogant,
I
stupidly
think he
like
was supposed to
pushy.
annoy everyone.
I think so too.
Yeah. And he gets this like feeling of importance from talking to this last Cardassian on the station. And that's amazing to me. I love the dynamic completely. And I kind of like am super happy with how it evolved because it went from exactly as you said, right? Like, is this just part of the ploy? Because he's a spy to like a legitimate friendship where they kind of miss each other when they're not around. Um, and I always kind of go back to when they're in the prison, right? When they're being held prisoner by the Dominion. And Julian almost has a sense of relief when he sees that Garrick is there. And they're just chit-chatting and talking, and it's like, back and forth, the kind of craziness of their dynamic. And they're in prison and they're trying to escape. But those characters really kind of shine through. Julian is helping to be covert and help, send the signal initially. And Garrick really comes into like, he's not just this Cardassian spy who misses home. He's really this like honorable badass. And even
Yeah.
Worf and Martog are like impressed by him. So I love seeing that dynamic for sure.
I think what I really like about them is that they're intellectual equals. And I think that's part of the reason why Julian comes off in the beginning, in the first season, as being really annoying, because he comes off as a character who knows that he is smarter than everybody else. And so they automatically pit him against this character who he doesn't even know. Like he knows the man is smart. He knows that Garrick is intelligent. And he knows that he's creative and he's keeping secrets. But the fact is that as the show goes on, you realize that he and Garrick are intellectual equals on different aspects. Obviously, Bashir with his genetic modifications and everything is just very smart. He's very good at his job. He's very good at his work, but he's not as socially intelligent as Garrick is. I mean, Garrick is paying attention to everything. And I think that was a very smart move on the writer's part to put them together in a way that makes Julian feel like maybe he's not the smartest man in the room.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's the attraction he had for Garrick. I'm going to say attraction because this is code signaling all over the place, and let's just get straight to
absolutely.
it. Like they want to be together, period. Yeah. Like they are drawn to each other in unhealthy ways, I think.
Oh, definitely.
No, and I think that's one of the things that makes their relationship even more interesting because and I think really kind of drives that aspect of Deep Space Nine as well, is the fact that you're waiting to find out whether that's actually going to become something or whether one of them is going to, change the direction of the relationship. And I feel like all the way through to the end, there's that possibility that could happen. And just so intelligently played by both of those actors.
Brilliantly. I love them.
I mean, to the point where it almost was unbelievable when either of them tried to develop an emotional relationship with anybody else.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Almost everybody else.
With one friendship exception, I would say.
Which is another interesting duo. Yeah, but it's so like interesting how much closer they get throughout the show. And at the end, when they're not going to end up in the same planet, right? Together. That almost is the most tragic part of this. there's another part of this for me, right? That's tragic as well, but it's just amazing. And the fact that he ends up with a Dax, Julian ends up with, Ezri. It still feels wrong to me that he ends up with
I
a
think
Dax.
because it feels like something's missing.
Yeah.
I I actually try and pretend that that relationship doesn't exist. I'm gonna be honest. I
Okay. It gives me, and not in the same kind of way, but it gives me Chakotay 7 vibes ish. Because it's
in
not
Yeah.
that
there.
it just appears out of nowhere and
Mhm.
there's no like actual basis for this relationship at all. But the writers are like, yeah, uh, the show's almost over. We're gonna start pairing people off, and these two are. I don't get it.
I think
Um,
that's why I really like that Andrew J. Robinson was able to get his novel published, because if you've read his novel A Stitch in
which
Time,
is brilliant.
it is brilliant. It's fantastic, but you get a little bit more insight into what Garrick is feeling towards Julian with regards to their friendship, and it shows him trying to continue that friendship after Deep Space Nine, and I love that. I love those chapters that he's writing to Julian,
Oh
because you can
yeah,
see him trying to rekindle what had happened on Deep Space Nine, but now they are obviously very far apart. Um,
it was
Very different.
probably the most beautiful love letter I have ever read.
it's so good. I
I
think
It
haven't
also
read
is.
it.
you
You
need to
haven't
read
read it?
it.
Don't read it.
We'll
Get
get
it
the audiobook.
on Audible or whatever audio you want to get it on because
Mhm.
he narrates it himself
Garrick reads it.
and
Oh,
it's
that's
brilliant.
perfect.
It's
It's
good.
perfect. That's how I enjoyed it.
And it's
Um,
unique for a Star Trek novel
it
because
is.
it's more thriller espionage novel than it is sci-fi, and
Right.
which makes sense for Garrick. And it's cool. It's great. And it reflects back on a lot of episodes and a lot of scenes with him and Julian, and how part of the reason why I think that dynamic really worked in the show is the fact that for the first few seasons, and debatably very close to like sixth, seventh season, you don't really know if Garrick is the good guy or a bad guy.
Yeah.
And so, is this a
I
villain
mean,
protagonist relationship? It, you know,
do we ever really find out if he's a good guy or bad guy, though? Like,
He is a
obviously he
guy.
helps.
he's the guy.
He's a guy.
I mean, I think if you have read if you read his novel, I think you'll have a firm answer to that question. So I won't give any spoilers. But
Okay.
yeah, I think but that's a great thing about a character. When the show ends and you still aren't sure, you're still asking yourselves questions about that character. I think that means that they've created something really special there.
No,
I
agreed.
agree.
Absolutely.
I agree. Are
Do we
we
want to
ready
talk?
to move on to basically the same thing but completely different?
I
On that
mean,
on that note, Julian and Miles O'Brien.
Ah, so I love that we still have Julian and he had really dynamic friendships with multiple people in Deep Space Nine.
He did.
He had a very interesting relationship with Dax, but he didn't really get that like dynamic duo with anyone except Garrick and O'Brien, and it's very different between those two duos. Like
it's
the
and
friendship
it's
is
it.
so it is more the traditional like competitive two-man friendship between Julian and O'Brien, and sometimes I think they bring the worst out in each other,
Oh,
and I
absolutely.
love when they do that.
Um.
With one exception for me. There's one episode that drives me nuts. And it's
Okay.
based I think we know when Miles is basically ignoring Keiko and the baby for
Yes,
Julian. Like,
100%.
okay.
Yep.
That is one of the worst. And it's just kind of funny because they almost admit that Miles likes Julian more than Keiko.
Yeah, they do.
I I think they do. I think that Miles admits it with his actions. Like,
He does, but he like verbally he doesn't, right? Like he stops himself short of saying the thing. And Julian just laughs because he's like, yeah, I know how you really feel. It's fine. But what's super interesting to me is like, just another famous like Star Trek throuple, right? There's Bones, McCoy, Kirk,
Mhm.
or
yes.
Bones, McCoy, Kirk, and Spock. Um, but they're all friends, right? And it's not the same kind of like buddy because there's almost animosity between Bones and Spock in a lot of situations, like deep friendship, but also animosity. And it's not like they love each other more than whoever they're supposed to be with. It's really a throuple. This, like, Julian is deep, deep, deep friends with Miles and Garrick on two totally separate wavelengths,
Yeah.
right? They fill two different needs that he has emotionally in very deep ways. And he's a very complex character. We find out later on he's not quite normal, right? Which,
In quotes.
well, I
Yeah.
mean,
He is mildly genetically modified, it's fine.
Well, I think for me, I always kind of saw it as, like I said, with Garrick, this is him discovering an intellectual equal. This is him with somebody who can surprise him. Like, Garrick, he doesn't know from one minute to the next what Garrick is going to do whenever they meet up for lunch. But Miles is the opposite of that. Like, Julian, this is not an intellectual equally friendship. This is like a how do I become more like everybody else friendship. This is like I'm learning from Miles how to be a little bit more socially adaptable and
the everyman. Yeah.
right, yeah, the everyman.
Uncomplicated. I like
Exactly.
I think that whole episode where the other genetically modified people are there and they say, well, they like you because they find you uncomplicated. And you kind of realize that this is kind of how Julian finds him. Like,
Right.
O'Brien is O'Brien. You get what you see. There's no airs about him, and you're not having to hide anything. And I do think it's interesting. Gregory's sitting here talking about how Garrick almost killed O'Brien, but he wasn't quite himself either. And I really think, and this is not based on anything that's ever been said that I'm aware of, right? I think he doesn't go as far as he could have with O'Brien because deep down in the back of his mind, he knows that would destroy his friendship with Julian as well. And that's always going to be there because he knows how close they are.
Yeah.
There's definitely a competitiveness there between those two. There's no real friendship between O'Brien and Garrick, which is what's most interesting. Like, O'Brien never really trusted him. And I think that's another thing that makes this kind of different from the whole like Kirk's, Spock, McCoy dynamic, right?
I think too, for me, Julian's friendship with O'Brien feels very like there's an underlying jealousy almost that he sees O'Brien, who's he's got a good job. He's kind of like an enlisted Starfleet officer. He's done well for himself, but he's not climbing the ladder like Julian has climbed the ladder. And yet Miles has, he has the wife, he has the kid, he has the secure position, and he's good with people. He's good with Quark. He can have a drink with almost anybody, maybe Garrick being the exception. I do think there is some envy there on Julian's part. I think part of his friendship is just kind of learning how could I be more like that? Like, obviously he sees in the beginning that Jadzia is not interested in him. And I think he sees in Miles like somebody who has been successful in ways that he's never been successful. As opposed to his relationship with Garrick, which is basically kind of more in the direction he would go on his own, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and Miles is super close to Jadzia as well because Miles is brilliant. He is one of the best engineers ever in Starfleet, if not the best, right? I know people will say Scotty or Jordy, but Miles O'Brien has always been like the perfect engineer for me. And like I come from this weird background, but I always idolized O'Brien's ability to be personable and also an expert in his field, brilliant, right? Like Julian's always going to have that, like, well, I'm really genetically modified. I'm not just a normal person. And yes, I'm at the top of my field, but I have an advantage. And then here's Miles, who's blowing the hell out of everybody else skill wise. And he's just an enlisted dude. I say just, it's not just, but he's an enlisted dude who didn't have like fancy training, like kind of learned as he went along and just became an expert and like grasped these super complex concepts. And he didn't go to the academy, which is just mind boggling, I think.
Yeah, I think, and Gregory mentioned in the chat, like the fact that he's a union guy, and also like, you know, he feels more like a really relatable character to the average Star Trek watcher. Like this is somebody that I can relate to because I am this person in my family, or this is my dad in the family, or this is, you know, my uncle with his own business, his own shop. And to be able to see that character be so successful, maybe even more successful than the engineers on the flagships, I think is a really cool thing to have. And I think that gives his character something that Julian sees, something that he can respect, but doesn't quite understand at the beginning of their friendship how he's managed to pull that off, because Julian is Julian.
Right. I mean,
Julian is Julian.
I think, look, I'm a little neurospicy, right? So I realize in the course of this podcast, right, that part of the reason I like O'Brien so much is for the same reason that I'm sure Bashir liked him, right? Like, because he is this every guy who's managed to do all these things. And so brilliant, by the way, like the Defiant was designed by Cisco and top Starfleet engineers to combat the Borg. And then it's O'Brien who comes in and fixes the problem.
Yeah.
And gets it working perfectly. It's just wild to me.
But it is a really interesting friendship, because I do feel like comparing the two friendships side by side, and what Julian gets out of the two friendships just is completely different. And and like Van said earlier, it really makes me wonder, like if season 7 had gone differently, if you know, if Jadzia had stayed, like, you know, what direction would both of those friendships have gone in? I feel like there could have been a really interesting opportunity there for Julian to maybe be in a position where he has to choose one friendship over the other, or yeah.
Okay. Are we ready?
Yes and no. I don't
Drama.
really have a lot more to say, but like the next one's probably gonna make me cry. So
Okay, and I will admit, like, I did not have a lot of time this week, so I had to rewatch this last night before I fell asleep.
oh, that's a good bedtime story. We had
This was
Selma
a bad idea.
and Louise as a bedtime story. Okay, so you watched it as a bedtime story, and Marty tried to watch it as a fun comedy.
I watched it for the
lunch.
first time over lunch the other day, and IMDb lied to me. IMDb told me it was a comedy, so I'm like, great, this is great. I'm gonna have this with my mozzarella and tomato salad. It's gonna be great.
No.
Lunchtime viewing pleasure. And I was traumatized for the 129 minutes that the movie was.
That movie is not a comedy, and anybody who put it, like, it was on IMDb. I thought it was like just a random review.
I'm pretty sure IMDb it said comedy/drama, and I was like, oh, okay.
It should have been like drama/drama.
Trauma.
Yeah, exactly.
With sprinklings of drama and comedy.
But I have to say, I've never seen a friendship like this in film and TV. And I really pushed myself yesterday to think, have I seen this before. I know for a fact I've never seen it before with two women. And I was I'm like, have I seen this before with a man and a woman? Have I seen this before with two men? They have a very interesting dynamic.
Yes.
I want to say
I
it's
feel
kind
like
of,
I have been in this friendship and I have seen this friendship in real life on multiple occasions. Um, but it's not something that I see a lot in media, and that's kind of disappointing because of how real it feels the entire time. We have two friends who absolutely are just they adore each other.
yeah,
Um, and we have one character who's in a very abusive relationship, and the other character is trying her hardest to get her friend out of that. But in in my personal experience, like being that friend trying to save your other friend is this incredible tightrope walking act. And you see that so well portrayed in the movie.
Mhm.
So
yeah.
it's like to the point of being difficult for me to watch, but it's just so real. Uh, and that is just a beautiful friendship. And I wish we had more friendships with women in media like this.
Yeah, I
Maybe
think for
not with
me,
the ending.
well, maybe
Sorry.
not.
Well,
I think that for me, the interesting thing, like you said, the fact that you have one character in this horrible abusive relationship and then the good friend trying to help her, but really, like, they are already in a relationship that supersedes the physical relationship either of them has with their partners. And the thing that struck me the most was the fact that that didn't change. They go through a lot of scenes where it looks like one of them could just get up and walk away. And it wouldn't feel weird, I think, watching it for the first time if one of them did decide, look, you're not, you can't tell me what to do. It's my husband or it's my boyfriend or whatever. But they both trust and respect each other's opinions enough that they stay in their relationship and they put their relationship above their relationship with anybody else. And I think
yeah,
that was what was really beautiful about it,
yeah,
if not tragic.
Well, I mean, I've had plenty of friends who have gone through trauma, um, and myself who, when you're on the outside watching a friend go through it, like there's this thing, like you can only do so much for them, like be available to help them, but you can't force or push them to end that abusive relationship because that never works out. So all you can do is be on the sidelines and be supportive and, give them something to realize like there is life outside of this like trauma bubble. And that's super hard. And you're right, like this movie um really portrays it in amazing ways. And it's so raw. And I think Van, like, not, before we started the podcast, you mentioned like you could take this movie, which was filmed in 1991, which to me is only like 10 years ago, but I know it's not only
yeah.
10 years ago.
It was 10 years ago. That makes sense to me.
Um, and you could put it in today, right? You can bring it straight up to today, and it's the same movie, and it's the same relevance, and it's the same societal problems, and it's the same, like, just issues for them, right? Like when everything goes down, the line that stuck out to me the most as I was rewatching it, because I think I saw it when it came out, right? Um, and I was very young. Um, was you know she shoots the dude, and then it's like, oh, we need to call the police. We need to like we've got to call the police. We've got to tell them what happened. And she looks right at her and says, "We don't live in that kind of world. Get the car." And I'm like, holy shit, nothing has changed.
Yeah, it's still that world.
Essentially, it's
Yeah.
still that world. And that to me was really hard because, and I mean, straight cis dude, like I don't have those same problems, but to understand that society, though we think has progressed so much over the last 30-ish years, um, we haven't really, and that's still a problem. And this scenario is still so realistic. That's impactful.
I think something else for me that I really liked about the relationship between Thelma and Louise is the fact that, first of all, there's an age difference there. It's not a big age difference, but it's enough to be able to think, okay, we see Louise as being older, a little bit more experienced in life, maybe a little bit wiser, and that's how it starts, especially with Louise being the one who has the traumatic event in the beginning. I mean, Thelma being the one having the traumatic event in the beginning. But by the end of the movie, they've almost kind of switched that dynamic. And I feel like at the end of the movie, Thelma is the one playing the more adult role and giving Louise permission to, make the wild choices that they make.
Yeah.
And I really liked that. Both because of the interplay between them, but also for the fact that you don't see a lot of female friendships with age differences.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And I think that makes a difference. Like, there is a difference between, a woman who is your age or a woman who is younger or older. Like, I don't know. It's just the dynamic is usually much more apparent. I don't know.
Yeah, I agree. It's
I do like the fact that the dynamic changed. I keep looking over. It's because I am live on TikTok to try.
Oh, I didn't realize we were live on TikTok at the same time.
Hi,
Hello,
TikTok.
TikTok. They probably
Well,
can't hear me and Marty. They probably just hear you.
yeah, I've got my cell phone and I'm just streaming because I see Christina do it sometimes. And anyway, so that's what I was doing. If you see me looking over.
I just figured you were looking at IMDb and trying to find out whether it's really a comedy or not.
Well, so
Yeah.
IMDb did not list it as a comedy. I did pull that up
Really?
as well. No, so I'm not sure where it was.
I'll have to find it. I'll find it. I know it was a legitimate source. Maybe it was Amazon Prime, because that's where I tried to watch it.
It could be Amazon. I feel like sometimes their descriptions are, I don't know.
Suspicious.
I don't think
Rotten
that.
Tomatoes has a horrible description, so I feel like
Yeah,
Well, all I have to
believe
say
that.
to anybody out there who has not seen Thelma and Louise, and if you're thinking about watching it, the trailer is deceiving. The main trailer, it comes off a little bit more humorous than the actual movie is. Like, it's not a popcorn watch. It's also not good for your mozzarella and tomato salad lunch.
Yeah.
Which I learned the hard way. I didn't finish the salad.
Thelma and Louise is going to traumatize you a little bit. Yeah.
But I think I read somewhere that the film was actually, I don't know what the word is, but they've put it under some kind of like national preservation because of the fact that it depicts a certain time in history that needs to be preserved for like filmmaking reasons, or I don't know. And I just thought to myself after I saw that, kind of what Van said, I'm like, well, it hasn't really changed. Like,
No.
Right.
So
preserve it? No, we don't need anyway.
I think it is a very well made movie. The storytelling is brilliant. You are on the edge of your seat pretty much the whole time, and it does break it up with just a little bit of fun and comedy. But yeah, you understand the choices that the characters make, that Thelma and Louise make. You understand the entire time. And even I do like to shout at my screen a little bit and be like, don't do that, even though I've seen the movie a million times. Like, they're gonna do the stupid thing again.
Yeah.
And even when I know that they could make a different choice, I'm like, yeah, I understand why. And so I feel less like I need to shout at them or argue with them about it, because yeah, I understand the logic behind their choices, and I think it's the actresses did an amazing job, the writers did an amazing job, like, the entire movie is brilliant, and I think that's what makes it so iconic and a classic, and
Mhm.
yes, preserve it forever, and hopefully in 50 years, we can look at it and be like, "Ah, that was a weird time."
Yeah.
Why would they make those choices? That doesn't make sense. I would love in 50 years for people to watch it and be like, okay, we have to actually add a disclaimer to help the audience understand their crazy choices.
I'd love for that to be 10 years.
I,
Or
I
next year.
I'm
But
a
you know.
pessimist.
I love this quote though here that you've put up on the screen from the Sci-Fi Queens, which is also a fantastic podcast. If you guys
Yes.
aren't already following the Sci-Fi Queens, you should absolutely follow them. That it shows the friendship and sisterhood of two women that are in a different time of their life but still support each other. And this is a thing. It's like I said, you don't see too many female relationships between two women of different ages where there isn't some kind of power dynamic. And that's one thing I really, really liked about this movie.
Yeah,
They do
absolutely.
have a very beautiful friendship.
And it's also such a pure friendship, right? Like, you know, almost a Frodo and Sam type closeness to them. That I find fascinating, that the only other dynamic I really see that's that close and that I think healthy in many ways and unhealthy in some ways is Frodo and Sam, right? And they're just living in modern society trying to deal with trauma and toxicity from like men in society. And the only other parallel is like this mythical friendship where they have to fight the Lord of Evil. Just
Right.
keep that in mind, right? Like,
We could just put Thelma and Louise in the Lord of the
uh,
Rings.
and
Give them the ring.
they would, it would be the same thing, right?
Yeah,
Like it's,
I mean, I see the parallel a
I
lot.
see it.
And at the end of The Lord of the Rings, Sam and Frodo were pretty convinced that, it was over for
Mhm.
them personally. Um, Unfortunately, in Thelma and Louise, there were no giant eagles swooping in at the
No.
last second to grab the car.
Or
yeah,
sentient trees.
That would have been helpful also. Um, though
I
they
would
were in
like
the
sentient
desert, there
trees.
weren't a lot of trees in the movie at
True.
all.
That's true.
There's a big hole in the ground though. Anyway,
Yeah.
okay. Are we moving on?
Yeah,
I think we
we're moving
can.
on. I love them so much. We have Crowley and
To some
Aziraphale, and they are very enemies to best friends, and that brings me all the joy.
I mean, how can you not find joy in these two?
They are so beautiful. I read the book many, many years ago and absolutely fell in love with their dynamic and was just amazed by them in the book, and then to see that come to life on the screen and see that it was kind of written a little bit differently, just the nature of storytelling is different between books and television, and they were definitely trying to stretch out the story, and so we did get more insight into their past in the show than we did in the book, which was beautiful. We got to see so many times, in the past when they did things together that were not in the book at all, and it's so fascinating to see their friendship evolve throughout time, but, like, they met at the beginning of time, essentially, and knew each other before Crowley fell, or I guess sauntered his way down. Um, but yeah, they are absolutely phenomenal and hilarious, and not to the level of Frodo and Sam in their devotion to each other, but like you see it repeatedly throughout both the book and the show that they are like thinking of the other person
Mhm.
a lot as they make choices. They are both, define their bosses for the other person regularly, knowing that the consequences for that are, awful.
I feel like this is also the first example of our grouping so far where you really can't have one without the other. Like,
No.
they don't, like some of the other characters, they could possibly stand on their own. Like, Julian, we could watch him in a different show. That would have been fine. But like these two, they need to be together, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and their
I mean,
dynamic to me, and I didn't read the books, and Van, you're the expert, so you're gonna be the one to shoot me down, right? But they're exposed to humanity, right? And humans are not pure evil or pure good. And I think the fact that they're supposed to be pure good and pure evil, but that they spend so much time around humans that they pick up the fact that there's nuance to everything. Um, so it kind of shows their humanity too, even though they're not human in any way.
Yeah.
Um, and that's one of the things I love about that dynamic, right? It's like you cannot be on Earth and think that things are purely bad or purely good. It's not possible. And I think that's the
Absolutely.
beauty of humanity. Like even the worst person has some capability for good. And even the best person has some capability for bad.
Yes.
I like this comment because I got to see this duo up close in real life,
You did.
and it was lovely. So, yeah.
I did send a photo that you were allowed to include, but I don't think you included it.
I was not sure, but hold on a second. Let me do the
It's funny
So,
things
because
that I
as
need to
somebody who was
do.
not a big fan of this before, see the TV show and before seeing cosplayers take it over, like honestly, cosplayers have made me enjoy this duo even more.
Oh,
oh,
cosplayers
yes.
are
I
amazing.
love how the cosplayers have taken the two of them and like really added to
Yeah.
them. But yes, Joseph was in town and got to see me cosplaying Crowley and my partner cosplaying Aziraphale, which was amazing. I loved it. We ran into a couple other Crowley and Aziraphales at the con, which was amazing. Ah, there it
There you
is.
guys are.
So this is like an exclusive first of Van's
Yeah.
partner. And I know they're off in the background, right? But it
Th-
was amazing.
This is
This,
another Fracken podcast exclusive.
yeah. I
Partner reveal.
Yeah, the partner reveal that everyone has been asking for. There you go. He's not wearing a mask this time.
Get out your magnifying glasses, folks.
Yeah. That was a lot of fun. But yeah, the cosplayers have definitely like brought so much life into these two.
I think
The
too, it's
fanfic that you can find about these two has been wild forever. But since the show came out, there's a lot of it.
I just really like how they are basically the epitome, and maybe even the starting place. I don't know. You can tell me because you've read the book. Are they the starting place for like the black cat golden retriever like mix? Because I feel like we see a lot of people comparing them to Loki and Mobius, and yeah,
they are definitely black cat, golden retriever. I mean, they really just are that, and I love that about them. And they are that way in the book quite a bit too. Crowley is definitely like the black cat. But it's so cute just to see them um together and just see how they interact with one another, and go to brunch, and go get food. And that's one of the big things that the two of them bonded over was food. Like, we're not gonna hang out because we like each other. We're both just gonna hang out because we like food. Um, it is so sweet to see them m- come up with excuses to hang out with each other while also saying, like, we're not friends.
Mhm.
We're
I'm also,
enemies.
yeah. Well,
Yeah.
that's the thing is I'm always impressed when writers are able to take two characters that are essentially at the beginning supposed to be protagonists and antagonists, and then blur the lines to a point that by the time the story comes to the end, or sometimes in the middle of the story, that they are both morally gray.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, at the point where the last season ended, I mean, Aziraphale is basically like, oh, did we just switch roles here? Like, where you see Crowley, like you said, gain this humanity over the course of the show, and I'm assuming over the course of the book, and becoming a character who is less evil, and then seeing the quote unquote good character kind of become a little bit morally subjective. I love it when they're able to pull that off successfully. It's not easy to do, and to
It is
keep people still interested in the dynamic.
It's got to be the slow evolution, right? Because you can't just like drop it.
Right.
It's not believable then, right?
No.
But it's like
Um,
every choice
yeah.
leads you into a different path.
Mhm.
It's beautiful. I do like in the show that it is canonically stated now that these are two non-binary characters. I do enjoy that. In the book, it's kind of hinted at, but the book is so old, it's not even, I think, something that they would have even known to write in. But it is very clear that Crowley believably dresses up as the nanny. Like, he is believably a woman. And you see a lot more hints to that in the show. Um, and throughout the history, when they're going back in time and showing you little clips, Crowley is repeatedly in feminine clothing. And it a lot of people overlook it until they realize, okay, he is wearing what the women around him are wearing, not what the men around him are wearing. And to see that visualized on screen was really, really fun and really fascinating. But we're talking about angels and demons. Like,
Right.
gender is not relevant to them. Um,
I will
so
say this: David Tennant is the perfect actor to make this happen. Right,
right?
just perfect.
He
He's so dynamic.
he is. And he pulls off uh the nanny brilliantly. And he has dressed up as a woman in several other things, I believe. I can't remember the name of the one I'm specifically thinking about, but uh he, he was brilliant in the casting. Of course, Michael was also brilliant. Like, the casting was done very, very well.
Yeah.
And their relationship left the screen, and like the two actors are just now friends, like best friends, obnoxiously so.
They
But I
are.
love them.
I've watched their interviews and stuff, in prep for this. I can't get over how amazing they are. It's like Patrick Stewart and Ian McKellen, right? Like
Exactly.
that level
Yes.
of like deep, close friendship.
Yes.
And you're right, the casting's just amazing. Um, Look, I am always going to be like this huge fan of both of them, but especially David Tennant. Like he walks into roles that are so different and he just pulls it off and it's so believable. I'm like, the dude's a chameleon and
He
it's
is.
amazing. Just amazing. Like I was
100.
watching this just random, I don't know, I'm getting off topic. Just random show on the BBC, right? Where he's it's kind of like this murder mystery
Is
thing.
it
And he's just
Broadchurch?
no, it's not
Oh.
Broadchurch. So it's like a movie or like a very short series where he plays a vicar.
Oh,
And
yes.
like this
Oh yeah.
Yes.
so amazing.
Very good.
Just like this pure vicar who like is loving and decent and just does these horrific things to protect his family. What he thinks is protecting his family, it's not even protecting his family, but it's just like this concept of even the best person, given the right circumstances, can turn into a murderer.
Yeah.
And I think it's just amazing. And it kind of relates to this whole topic because like he takes that same kind of energy into this where he's like, he's this villain and then he turns into this good guy. And it's just very believable. And that journey is just very, very amazing. So it's great writing, but also just overall the casting, right? David Tennant can do no wrong. I didn't know there was an American Broadchurch.
I didn't know that either.
I no.
I'm obsessed with Broadchurch. I mean, that's when
It's
I
so good.
realized that David Tennant had range.
Yes.
I didn't realize the range he had until I saw him in that. And fantastic. And I think that it helps him. I think it helps that he and Michael Sheen have that kind of Crowley Aziraphale relationship outside of the actual show, because it does come off very realistic and very tangible. Yeah, they're
Absolutely.
they're both great.
They're brilliant. But yeah. I love their duo. They saved the world together. I'm not sure what more you can ask from a duo.
It's true. And
True.
they stayed equals
They did.
They are.
throughout the journey. So that's also not easy to do. That's also cool.
I mean,
I
I'm gonna
do
put,
also. Oh,
I'm gonna put that up there because he
oh,
was such a bastard as Kilgrave. Anyway,
I hated him so much, like with so much passion in that role. Having, fell in love with him in his role in Doctor Who, and then watching that, just like, whew, yeah, oof, that hurt. But yeah, their dynamic is just fantastic. They prevented the apocalypse together, which is what we want. Um, yeah,
are we
we could
ready?
talk about them all day.
We could. I know you can for sure. Okay. Next,
Yay!
Brown, Marty McFly. I love these two so much. And I'm gonna put the bonus picture up as well because I
Oh
think
yeah,
that's a
the
great,
bonus picture.
So
that's a
jealous.
great
I'm
picture.
so jealous.
I have to say that was not this year, but last year he
Yeah.
came to GalaxyCon. And he had not been on my list of people because I was like, this man is way too popular. The line will never be short enough. And I happened to have wandered off on my own, and I got at least one or two other selfies at the same time. But there was like one person in his line, and I was like, this isn't possible. He must be about to leave or something. Because I mean, they're not sitting at their booths all day. But I talked to the lady running the little table, and she was like, "No, he's here for a little bit longer. You can get it."
Yeah,
But yeah,
that's a crime. That's a crime.
he is
I never would have left that line. I would have been like, I'm staying here forever, you guys.
Take all my
he is
money.
such a brilliant actor. So in the booth, they have just, some beautiful shots of the actor or actress, and you can purchase and then get them signed, and that's amazing. But his was like stacked on top of each other, and like just because he's had this huge, wide range of, amazing characters that he's played. And you look at him in Back to the Future, and he's this like old white-haired man, but he really was not that old when they filmed it.
No.
But you still get this great age gap between him and Marty, which is, I love this dynamic. We have the teacher and the student, but the student is necessary for the teacher.
I think also
So
the student is sometimes a little more self-aware than the teacher.
Yes. And the teacher needs that. They do not accomplish what they need to accomplish without each other. And
But they also screw up the timeline immensely because of each other.
I want to bring up this comment from Greg here. He talks about how, like, in real life, if this duo existed, social services would have been called having an old eccentric man befriend a teenage boy. And the funny thing about this is that if you Google the true backstory of their friendship, this is exactly why they took out their backstory.
Oh,
Really?
okay.
Yeah,
I
because
have
Okay,
never
wait, hold on.
if you look up like the true backstory, apparently originally in the screenplay, Marty McFly is like kind of dared by some friends to like break into like Doc Brown's house because he's like the crazy old inventor guy, and Marty's like kind of curious to see what he invents. So he actually does break into his house, and then Doc Brown is just kind of like, oh, here's a criminal delinquent that can help me do these things. I mean, Doc Brown is like involved with terrorists, right? So like they had to take it out because it came off as a little too dark, like a little too deranged that friendship would be built on that. And I'm glad that they did. It's funny, but I'm glad that they took it out because I always, as a kid, thought that Marty befriended him because he had no friends. I thought like, oh, he saw Doc Brown as a guy who has no friends. And he also, as a guy who, I don't know, does he really have friends like besides his band or whatever? Like, he's not the cool kid, even though he acts like he's a cool kid. I always thought it was like, oh, here is two guys that don't have friends. We're gonna become friends, despite the age difference. So I'm kind of glad that they didn't have the backstory in, because otherwise, as a kid, I would have been like, oh, a little less interested. But
yeah,
that would have been different. Yeah. I honestly like that would have taken away from the whole like terrorist scene, because it's like this like absent-minded professor is sitting here making these cool things, and all of a sudden he's somehow working with terrorists and getting plutonium or uranium stolen for his time. It was wild.
It is wild, right?
And so perfectly 80s, by the way. Like the 80s was the
80s.
decade for just wild, crazy stuff to happen.
I mean, the 80s was wild. So it makes sense.
What I remember of it was, yes, indeed.
I mean, I had those like super multicolored bicycle shorts and the big baggy shirts that you clip together with like with the scrunchie. So like it was wild. It was wild. But I love this relationship. I don't know that I would have loved it so much if I'd seen the movie first as an adult. I think the fact that I saw the movie when I was a child really cemented the love of this relationship for me, because like as someone who was always kind of told as a kid that like I was older than my years or whatever, I was always thinking, yeah, I would make friends with the crazy old guy next door, like with the cool car and like the crazy inventions. That makes perfect sense to me, like absolutely. And like Van said, it's nice to have the character who, like, you would think that the older character is the educational, the teacher type, but really in the series, like Marty's the one that's like, whoa, Doc, like, yeah, this is heavy. Slow down. You're going off the rails here a little bit, like. And it's funny to have the teenager kind of being the voice of reason for most of the series.
I think
I do love that, but they remind me in a lot of ways to Sherlock Holmes and Watson because we have like these super absurdly smart character to the point that he's kind of non-functional. And then we have the very like worldly I am savvy with people character. And I've got to bring you back to reality every now and then. Like it's a beautiful dynamic. I love to see it. But they
Also,
balance each other out so well.
I mean, also the fact that they do kind of form this like father son situation, which makes a lot of sense considering like in the initial timeline, like Marty's relationship with his dad is
it's
basically
horrible.
non-existent. It's so bad. Like it makes sense that then Doc would kind of build this like emotional attachment to him. You know, I mean, he has to go back and save him, make sure he's gonna still exist, and or make sure that his kids are gonna be okay. Like, I mean, that's
Well, you bring up a good point because one of the reasons why Marty did not get along with his dad is his dad gave up on everything, always.
Yeah.
And then Doc Brown gives up on nothing that he wants to
mm-mm.
do. It doesn't matter how long it takes, right?
Right.
Like it was like 30 years. He fell in the bathroom, hit his head, thought up of a time machine, and spent the next 30 years making it, right? Like that's just wild commitment.
Well, I mean,
And I think one
George
of the
gave
reasons,
up on his own kids, and then Doc shows
yeah,
up and says, "Hey, Marty, we have to go to the future to save your kids, to protect your
yeah,
kids," which is not something his dad would have done.
yeah.
Yeah.
And that would, I don't know, kind of even after they fix the timeline in the first one, and George is a little bit better, quote unquote. I still feel like he kind of doesn't really care about his kids.
I think he cares less for his kids, right? Like he's able to provide for his kids. That's
Right.
different.
That's true.
Yeah.
That's
Giving
a good
money to
point.
your kids is different from caring for your kids.
Definitely.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, this is why I love that dynamic so much. It's just Doc Brown legitimately, passionately cares for Marty and cares for the things he cares for, right? Um, Up to including, oh God, what's her name? The character from the third movie that he falls
Mary,
in love with.
Mary Steenburgen's character.
Yeah, I forget her character name though. But he's just like so much in love with her. He gives up everything to be with her. Well, for 5 minutes we think he gives up everything to be with
Yeah.
her.
But that was a nice touch though that they added that, because then it gave Marty the opportunity to repay the favor to
Mhm.
Doc that Doc had basically done for him for the first two films.
Yeah.
Yeah.
To help him find his happiness and fix his life. So
And
that
totally
was
violate the prime director, the temporal prime
absolutely,
directive.
you know.
Temporal prime directive. Yay!
Clara.
Yeah.
Thank you, Alfred's
Clara, that's it.
animation page.
Alfred is fantastic. Also a fantastic person to follow on Instagram and TikTok. Alfred is an amazing animator. So if you're not following him, follow him.
Thank you for that. 10 o'clock, do you know where your children are? No, no 80s parent
Oh,
knew where their children
yeah.
were. Except for
That
mine. I was
my
always at home. Sorry.
yeah.
Well, I was going to say, John mentioned earlier in the chat that Marty played guitar. He must have been cool. Like, John, I played guitar. I was not cool. But I also had the jelly shoes too. So that might have been part of the problem.
I think that Marty's parents in the film are very stereotypical for that time. In movies, that's the kind of parents we got. They're not very involved, not really paying attention. So yeah, maybe his dad
Which makes
was
sense why Marty would become friends with Doc.
yeah,
Because Doc does give
he
him that
needed a
attention.
father and he
He gives him
needed
attention.
attention. And Doc was like, "Oh, look, it's like a son."
Also, he had that really cool amplifier.
This is true. But yeah, no,
Which,
their
like, why would he
relationship is
have
so much
that?
fun.
Did he make that for Marty? I always thought he must have made that for Marty, right?
Right? I mean, yeah,
Why would
I
he need
I
that?
think he had to.
because he had a son and he cared for him. That's why.
Yeah. He had a son. And they were adorable.
hmm Yeah, I think
Okay.
it's one of the rare aspects of like an adult and a teenager having a really good relationship.
A
Yeah.
healthy one. Well,
And a healthy,
healthy-ish.
well, terrorists and plutonium aside.
I mean,
I mean, every once in a while you have to go a little bit off the rails, I guess, for
changing
friendship.
timelines.
It's okay. It all mostly worked out in the end. It was fine.
Except for Biff. But, who cares about Biff?
Well,
Just he can make like a tree and get out of here.
uh, what's that Chicago song? He had
Oh,
it coming.
He had it coming.
Exactly. Yeah, no, he had it coming. He gets no sympathy. Sorry.
He only had himself to blame.
I
If
mean,
you'd have been there,
there
You'd have
there
seen it.
is there is this explanation about how he portrayed the actor portrayed Biff in a very specific manner to mimic a real life character, but I'm not a person. But I'm not going to get into that. But I want you to think about that because that gets a little too political. But it was very, very much done on purpose.
I see it. I'm
Right?
picking up what you're putting down.
Right? Anyway.
yeah. Let's move on to our next adorable duo, Gimli and Legolas. This is not quite enemies to best friends the way Crowley and Aziraphale are. But also it kind of is because elves and dwarves hate each other. Um, yeah. They their friendship as it evolves throughout the three books or the three films is just phenomenal. They go from not trusting each other, not liking each other, just why would I trust an elf? Um to in the end in the books, they don't get into this for the movies unfortunately, which breaks my heart, but in the books, they spend the rest of their lives together.
Yeah.
What?
They
Yeah.
spend the rest
What?
of their lives together.
Stop. Do I have
Marty.
to read Lord of the Rings now?
Yes.
Have you not read it?
First
I
off,
have tried. I have tried.
okay. So Sam and Frodo also spend the rest of their lives together.
I kind of picked up on
Sam
that
gets
though.
married. He
Mhm.
has 13 kids. But him and his wife, Rosie, I believe,
Rosie.
it's a
Yeah.
flower. They move in with Frodo at Bag End. Like, so it's the
Stop.
three of them living together, and then both of them end up going to the Undying Lands on the boat with the elves because both of them carried the ring.
Yeah.
Um,
I
so I
don't
do
need
think
any
they
more
go
ships
on
in my
different
life.
boats at different times. I think Frodo goes first, and then later Sam goes after his wife dies. But they're together forever. Merry and Pippin, after they have kids and like their kids grow up and move out, they go hang out with Aragorn, and
Mhm.
like they get buried next to Aragorn.
Yeah.
Legolas and Gimli spend forever together. Like it is
I
the
feel like I have to defend the fact that I haven't read Lord of the Rings. I'm gonna do it as quickly as possible. I have tried to read it. My best friend growing up, absolutely obsessed with Tolkien, everything of Tolkien. And like I did this like ongoing kind of joke. Every time I went somewhere, if I saw a Tolkien book, I bought it for him. So like he can thank me for half of his collection. But I tried to read it for him and I struggled, like 50 pages of trees. Come on, you guys. And then I told myself at university, I said, you know what? I'm finally going to read it. I'm an English major. I need to read Lord of the Rings. Like, how dare I not? And there was a teacher who was teaching a class on Tolkien and Lewis I'm like, perfect, because I've never read Chronicles of Narnia either. I'm sorry, it's true. And so I signed up for this class. I'm like, great, I'm going to read Lord of the Rings, and I'm going to read the Narnia books. I'm going to get it out in one semester, done, and I can be proud of myself and my degree. And then not enough people signed up for the class, and it was canceled.
No. Wow.
So-
That's
I
tragic.
have
I feel like I got kind of I feel like I kind of cheated because yeah, he does talk about trees a lot. But growing up, my dad read us bedtime stories a lot. But he would read us big books. And when we were tiny, it was like Charlotte's Web. But he read The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings to us, and he read those 4 books probably 3 or 4 times throughout my childhood.
my gosh.
Because there's 5 of us across 11 years. So, he had to read it again for the next kid.
I guess this is where my parents went wrong, because my mom was reading Stephen King to me. So
No,
which explains a lot,
there was
maybe.
no Stephen King in the house. No.
But I have to say about Gimli and Legolas, having only seen the movies, sorry, and maybe I'm going to get a lot of hate for this comment. I don't know. It's going to be controversial. So please strap yourselves in, you guys. They give me Harry and Marv from Home Alone vibes.
I gotta leave. I can't be.
But like in a good way. I think
Oh.
Harry and Marv end up staying together forever, so it makes sense to me. But like there's a Harry and Marv vibe there for me.
They're goofy.
They are very goofy in the films. So
I think it's that
I'm
like
gonna give you
the way
that
they,
one.
the way the comedy
gonna
plays
judge
off
you.
each other.
I'm gonna judge you.
I've
been
gonna
judging her
give you
for
that one.
15 minutes now.
I'm sorry. All right, I will find
Listen,
a
you just
nice
need
copy of
to
Lord of the Rings.
hang out with a doc and have Doc take you back in time to fix the timeline. So one of your
More
parents
people
reads
sign up for
you
the
Lord
class.
of the Rings.
Oh my-
And so when you sit down to read it, it's just like, oh, this is nostalgic.
guess
Have you
I
read
can
The
read it.
Hobbit? You have not read The Hobbit?
I mean, it's by the same author.
There is
It's a
the
different
end
tone.
that's really
told-
hard to
I'm
read
told that
'cause
I should
there is
start
a
with The
lot
Hobbit.
about trees.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm
So
I'm
a
told
lot
I should
about
start
trees.
there.
I read The Hobbit in 6th grade. It is very much a child's story, right? It is
Perfect for me.
much easier to read that book and get into the world through The Hobbit. If you don't start with The Hobbit, if you like pick up the Silmarillion or whatever, you're never going to want to read Tolkien because
Yeah.
you don't care. It's just like, I don't know who these characters are. I don't know what this world is about. I don't care. Throw it away.
Yeah. I
But
tried
I
to
can-
start with The Fellowship, and I think
No.
I should have started with The Hobbit. Maybe.
I
The
think you have to
Hobbit
start
is
with
more
The
fun.
Hobbit.
Right.
Yeah.
And if you like audiobooks at all, there are some really great audiobooks of The Hobbit.
Have you seen the Hobbit cartoon?
I have. Yes. Yes. It traumatized me in the same way that like I was traumatized by all of those like 80s semi-anime movies.
I mean, that's fair.
That's fair.
because-
It was kind of
Yeah,
like
that's fair.
I don't want to say it gave off Land Before Time trauma vibes, but there was something about the way the art was done in the Hobbit cartoon animated film that horrified me. And I've still watched it a million times, but it horrified me every time.
Yeah, I mean, but they were just trying to traumatize children, I think, because this is the same time period
was
as
the
like
80s.
The Last Unicorn, which
Traumatic.
that'll traumatize you.
Traumatic.
Disney even had the Black Cauldron. They won't even
Traumatizing.
talk about it now. They try and pretend they never made it.
All dogs go to heaven.
Traumatizing.
I love the Black
Yeah,
Cauldron.
the Black Cauldron's brilliant. I love it. It's one of my favorite princesses.
okay.
Disney princesses. She is my favorite because she is like a 12-year-old child. And she looks like a child and she acts like a child. And she is in no way sexualized. And I'm like,
Mhm.
whoa, Disney, you can do this? And
A
then you never
miracle.
do it again. What the fuck?
All right, convince me that Gimli and Legolas are not Harry and Marv. And go.
I mean, first of all, they're like princes from their respective races who are well regarded, like fierce warriors, and you
The
get more of
Prince
that in the book.
Bandits. Gotcha. I'm sorry.
You're killing me, Marty. You're killing me. I mean, they're these badass warriors who represent their races in kind of like this continuation of this like epic struggle. They very much don't fall for a 10-year-old's booby traps. You're killing me when you make that comparison. But they're also like these amazingly loyal and deep characters in the books, right? Like Gimli in particular falls absolutely head over heels in love with Galadriel.
It's so
Just
cute.
You
he
had
just
me there
has
for a
this
second.
for a second. But like Galadriel is like this epic elven queen, and he's just enamored with her beauty and her grace. And you just get so much out of that. Like like gives him this gift, and he's like so absolutely in love with the gift that she gives him, and he's just obsessed with these hidden elves in the forest. And he starts off very much afraid, right? Like of that forest and not wanting to go in, and not only overcomes that fear, but like falls in love with the forest. And that's the thing. Like at the end of the book, he promises Legolas that he's going to show him all of the mighty dwarven kingdoms and their beauty. And then Legolas promises to take him around and show him all of the elven kingdoms and forests. And they spend their life together, traveling and experiencing the beauty of their worlds together. Like it is such a
It's
deep.
legitimately
Add to
adorable.
cart.
Yeah.
They are just amazing together.
They are
Um,
so much fun. And they do start out as not really enemies, but definitely rivals, not friends at all. But they do realize that the other one is, a brilliant warrior, and they respect that. And then they fight side by side, and that, bonds them in a way. They go on this very epic journey together. And you see them grow closer throughout the book and throughout the movies. So they go from like it sort of enemies, sort of rivals to this is my best friend. I I know in the movie there's a scene, I believe it's in the second film, where they're trying to catch up to Merry and Pippin.
mhm.
And the riders of Rohan have surrounded them. And Gimli is acting like Gimli and just kind of being a bit of a stubborn pain. And
Rash.
that like he's in danger for a second. And the first thing that Legolas does, this brilliant man, so smart. The first thing he does is like pulls an arrow and points it at somebody like, I would kill you before you could kill him. And he's surrounded by dozens and dozens of heavily armored warriors. Like this is not going to work out for him. But like just somebody threatening his best friend, he cannot keep it calm and collected for like 2 seconds. It's adorable. They are in multiple battles, looking out for each other, fighting side by side, saving each other.
I feel like then, without having read it, it sounds to me like the films didn't do their relationship complete justice then, because when I watched the films, like I did understand that there was like a competitive nature to them in the beginning that became friendship, that you do see that arc, but I felt like their relationship in the film was more to add a little comic relief for all of the heaviness that was going on. And it sounds like that loses a lot of the nuance to the relationship.
Tolkien did not write them as hilariously as Peter Jackson portrayed them. And I understand that creative license was taken throughout the films. most of
Oh,
which I understand and agree with.
it annoys me some though.
I mean, taking out Tom Bombadil, like I'm never gonna be okay with that. But Marty
Yeah.
doesn't know what I'm talking about because she
I
hasn't read the
don't, but
books.
I love the name. The name sounds great.
He's amazing. His wife is amazing. One of the biggest.
Wait, there's a woman in Lord of the
Yeah,
Rings?
there's another
That's
woman
not
that.
Galadriel?
Yeah,
Hold
we
on.
get
Stop
3
the
women
presses.
in the films. But yeah, no.
Tom Bombadil is like he's like the epic mythical character who literally, if he decided that he was going to take care of the ring, they wouldn't have needed anybody else, including the Eagles. Like he's this powerful character who's just pure good and
He's so
just
perfect.
I just
just
can't get over the
joyous.
fact that we could have had more than Kate Blanchett and Liv Tyler.
Yeah.
I mean, we could have had so much more, and that's
Really.
one of the things that bothers me is like he was just totally written out of the books, and he is this important, uplifting presence in the books, that's so essential to them and like helps nurture them and guides them, even though he's not in it a lot, right? But like I almost kind of think he's like the spirit of nature, almost, right? Like
Yeah.
pure.
His character is never really fully explained by Tolkien. Tolkien liked to do that. But
Went
yeah,
straight to hell.
he's definitely
Yeah.
an old, like, primordial, almost like God. Like you get enough of that information. Um and yeah, no, he saves the hobbits at the very beginning
Hmm.
of their journey. And without him doing that, they wouldn't have made it to Rivendell. Like he was absolutely essential. But the first chunk of the movie is very different from the books. And the books, it's very stretched out. After Bilbo's birthday, it's a long time. There's a whole nother Hobbit. I can't remember his name right now. Um, but there's a fifth Hobbit, and he does not go on the journey. And it is decided that he's going to like stay back and pretend to be Frodo for a while.
I forgot
Um,
about that.
so that people who are looking for Frodo are confused for a little bit, and that gives Frodo more time. Merry and Pippin were always supposed to go with him. It's not that they just picked them up in a random field. So they're actually slightly goofier in the movies, because they did think it through in the book, and they did like plan to go with Frodo. Another amazing dynamic duo is Merry and Pippin. I love them so much.
Yeah. I think
Okay, we've got to move on, or
okay.
Joseph and I are
I'm
going to
just
bore
fascinated.
Marty
You
to
know what?
death.
I'm not bored. I'm thinking to myself, maybe I will do like a Hobbit read along and see if somebody will do it with me online. Maybe I'll just
That
do
would be
like a
so fun.
pay attention. Maybe I'll do my as I read review. Chapter one
I
of the
hope you
Hobbit,
do.
guys.
I hope you do.
I want to see that.
That would be so much fun. Tolkien wrote friendships very, very well. He couldn't write women fantastically, but he could write about trees and he could write about friendship. And
And he could break
I
into
love it.
musical interlude for no reason whatsoever.
Well, I mean,
You
I
know
am
what?
fascinated by his ability to create language.
Yes.
That is also very because I feel like, and I have no evidence to this, but I feel like Tolkien's ability to create like the Elven languages maybe has led to Klingon being in Star Trek.
There's some parallels there, right? And definitely Tolkien's like this inspiration for a lot of things that came after, just because it's like, oh, you could actually come up with this whole like linguistic thing.
I mean, I want to
So
give him all the credit, but he did copy most of it from a dying language in Europe. So I'm not going to give him all the credit. It is based on a real language, whereas Klingon was just somebody coming up with a few words at a time as needed for Star Trek. Um, but yeah, the fact that both of those languages you can just learn and have full conversations with people is hilarious and incredible.
yep, absolutely. Okay.
Oh, and
Now
my
we're in
Mulder
my
and Scully.
territory.
Mulder and Scully. Yeah, this is where Marty will talk. I love them. I love them. I think this is
Oh,
another
perfect.
relationship where we have one character who needs grounded,
Mhm.
like Doc and Marty. Mulder sometimes needs to be grounded, even though he's right. Um, he does need to be grounded, and the two of them work really, really well
Mhm.
together.
I love Mulder and Scully. This is my favorite television show. I know everybody's shocked. It's not Star Trek. X-Files is my favorite television show. This was my first real introduction to a man and a woman character who were truly just colleagues and then truly just friends for a very long part of the show and chose not to be lovers for like the
So they
majority of
did.
the show until they did. But I mean, the first 5 seasons of the show really was like it was this bond between two people who really had nothing in common except for their careers, and even their careers were slightly different paths, but like they worked at the same place. They didn't have anything in common, and then were able to build a respect and a rapport with each other that stretched, uh, you know, the length of the show that it did. And I had never seen that in my life before. I'd never seen a man and a woman be able to have that kind of a relationship. Yes, you are just here. We just started talking about Mulder and Scully. Welcome. I'm actually in a rewatch of the show right now, and something that fascinates me is that when I watched this show as a young person, you guys will have to tell me if you have the same feeling. When I watched the show as a young person, I was 100% convinced that Mulder was the protagonist, that it was all about him.
Right.
And watching it as an adult, I've discovered that this show is about Scully. The show is actually the whole show is her character arc. His character arc actually happens right before the first episode. You know,
Yeah.
he doesn't change, right? His relationship with Scully changes, and his feelings for her change. But Scully is the one that has a progressive character arc from the beginning
Oh,
until the end. Like she is the one. It's all about her faith. He already has his faith, right? And it's all about her faith. And I love how they navigate that together as colleagues and then as friends, and kind of as I don't know. Can we call them their partners? I guess. But the fact how he navigates her faith with her and how she follows her faith towards what it becomes, I think that's really what the show ends up being about. And I don't know. I just they are fantastic.
I do
Um,
love them.
yeah.
Sorry. Go ahead. Go ahead.
I will have to admit that this is not a show I was allowed to watch growing up. So I didn't come from, I saw this as a kid and I'm rewatching it later. I think the first time I saw it, I was definitely a teenager, a young adult, and I just caught some random episodes at a friend's house. And then I've gone back and watched the show, but it was definitely as an adult, and I always thought Scully was the main character. But that's because, like, redheaded woman. I was very distracted by this. I'm going to admit it. I was very distracted. Redheads and women are distracting. It's not my fault. But
I
yeah,
have to agree with
her
that.
Yeah,
her
I do
character
too.
arc is so fascinating to watch.
It is.
And I love Mulder just in the background, being like, "Yeah, come on, come on, come down this path with me." He's constantly encouraging her,
Well, I
a
just love
little
how
bit too much at times.
no, but I love how he has his faith. His faith is what happened to his sister. His faith is that the conspiracies and the aliens, and then she has her religious faith. And I love how she grapples with her religious faith, but she doesn't grapple with it because of the aliens. and the conspiracies. She grapples with it because of what happens to her sister and what happens to
Yeah.
her dad. And it's all, she's very grounded, like you said, in the real world. She's grounded in her real relationships here on Earth. And that ends up being really what the whole thing is about. And then Mulder kind of, yeah, in retrospect, watching it now as an adult, he is basically just kind of there to help her find out where she's going to land with her belief system.
I do find that her journey is the main point of the show, but it's also she's the every person character in the show. She's very much like grounded in reality. She's a doctor and a law enforcement person who has a very analytical, logical like mindset. And so it's like, how much more proof do you need before you believe the impossible to be possible? And I love it. Now, I will also say that there's one thing about their dynamic that you are not going to bring up that I will bring up, right? Like, I will watch another random show and a character will die, and everybody in my family will scream out, they got Mulder and Scullied. Because, absolutely, if this was based in the real world, they would have been booted from the FBI because so many people die under their watch. Like, it's a great show. They are pursuing the weird, but they really suck as FBI agents overall, is what I'm going to say. And that's probably controversial, but like I feel there should be like a legal ad if you or someone in your family has been murdered by
Krychek,
unexplained.
then.
Yeah, exactly. Like it's just this weird dynamic, but it's also, and I like Sarah mentioned, like Chris Carter is totally anti-shipping because I think the shipping actually takes away from the characters.
I agree. I think that's the point when the show starts to lose its cohesiveness.
Yeah,
But
they jump
as
the
I
shark.
think with a lot of relationships in fandom spaces, it's only as interesting as long as they are not officially together, because there's always that unresolved tension. The moment that you resolve the tension, you've resolved a huge aspect of the story, and then the dynamic changes. And usually when the dynamic changes, one character becomes a certain way and loses maybe that charm they had as the one that, wasn't necessarily there for a physical relationship. So that is
Yeah.
something about the show that did always bother me and still does bother me.
I enjoy shows more. There are so many shows that I could bring up where you have two leads and then they have this amazing tension between them. And it's so fantastic and you love the show. And then they get together and you're like, I don't know that I like this show anymore, actually.
Yeah, I
Um,
think that part of it in a show like the X Files just detracts from the actual story itself, right? And um what I really do love about like the whole dynamic and the character arc is how things switch for Scully when Mulder is dead.
Mm-hmm.
And she goes from being the skeptic to being the Mulder character. And there's these two other agents come in. And it's like, it was a really weird season. And it's probably not a lot of people's favorites, but that's when you really, really realize Scully has done a total 180 and is a believer.
Well, that's the thing that's cool about the show is you have two characters who are very strong in their belief systems,
Mhm.
and then but two very different belief systems, and to see where those systems cross over and overlap kind of adds as much tension to the story as it did the fact that they weren't together.
Yeah.
And that was one of the coolest things about the show, was that everybody's talking about Mulder like he's crazy because he believes in aliens, and maybe his ideas are wild, the Fiji mermaid and everything. But Scully also believes in something that she cannot verify, she can't quantify.
Mhm.
And that's a cool dynamic.
It is a really cool dynamic. Um, except for when they actually do become romantically involved, it's just like this. It feeds the need for like this like scientific geekiness and logical need that you get with Scully, and also like your desire for the fantasy and the unreal to be real, right? And I think that's what like really drew me in is like you've got one perspective where it's like very much like me, grounded in science, grounded in reality. But then there's always a part of me that wants to believe in the impossible, right? And to like dangle that carrot, like the impossible is actually true. It's like, okay, I'm just gonna keep watching because I want her to realize that.
Well, I think that's what
Um,
made some of this episode so compelling is because a lot of the what do they call it? The episodes like that are not like the the word, I've lost the word. You've got like the conspiracy episodes, right? They're
mhm.
like the continuing storyline. And then you've got like the one-off monster episodes. But a lot of those one-off episodes, the endings are kind of vague. And I remember watching it with my family and like I would think, "Oh, it's like Mulder. Like it's real. It's real. It's real. That thing is out there." And then like somebody else in my family would be like, "No, I think they kind of like that was a real guy. He just had some genetic disorder or something." And so there was like a lot of like there was multiple ways to interpret a lot of the episodes. I think that was fun. You could interpret it as Scully or you could interpret it as Mulder.
It was a very like Scooby Doo esque type situation, right? Like you expect this thing to be weird all the time, but like, is it? No, not really. It's like just normal. And that's one interpretation, and I like that part of it. But you're right. Like you could look at it as, no, maybe it's something more. And even the newer seasons came out, decades later, had those Monster of the Week episodes, and I loved them.
I love
I
the Monster of the Week episodes.
And the comedy episodes, right?
Yeah.
Like the lizard man who like transforms into a human, right?
Doesn't he
that
transform
is
into like
so he's like
yeah, but what's that guy? It's a famous actor he transforms into. Is the guy from isn't he from Our Flag Means Death? Reese Darby. I think it's Reese Darby. We'll have to look it up.
I didn't catch that, but maybe
it might be. I could just be making things up. Entirely possible. I did lie earlier about IMDb, and I was called out on it. So
you didn't lie. You couldn't remember. There's a difference.
I think it's Amazon Prime, you guys. You can't trust their description on shows.
I was not trying to call you out.
It's okay.
But yeah, if I had read a review that said this was a comedy for Thelma and Louise, I would have been furiously throwing my laptop at the wall or something. Like it's like, no, you can't advertise that movie as a comedy. Anyway.
No.
Okay. Anything more?
But the X-Files was also my introduction to fan fiction, so.
Ooh.
Oh, really?
Yeah, that's the first fan fiction I ever read was an X-Files fan fiction.
That's a good one.
Well,
good one.
It was an intense fan fiction. That's how I discovered
the
spice.
Marty reads fan fiction and immediately goes spicy.
I'm like, oh. Well, I remember I there was a friend of mine who she was a big Scully fan. She had naturally red hair. I was a big Mulder fan. She found fanfiction.net. It was because of her. If you were watching, Nikki, I'm still not over it. She found this. Oh, it was crazy. It was crazy.
I forgot about this episode, but this is a good call out. And
oh yeah,
the episode where a shapeshifter turned into
is that Small Potatoes
and got someone pregnant.
I can't remember which episode it is.
I think that episode is called Small Potatoes.
Oof.
I think.
Because I love that Sarah's in the comments like.
Doesn't he have a tail? The guy has like a
tail.
Tail?
Yes, I think so. And that's how they realized it was the same person, right?
Look, yes.
But then he turns into Mulder and like kisses Scully, right?
Yeah.
Or makes a pass at Scully. Yeah, it was so amazing. There's just so much good content for the X-Files. like
Yeah.
overall.
That was that also the episode with Luke Wilson, wasn't it? With Owen Wilson's brother, I think. And every time they told the story, they were like telling it from their own points of views, and they saw things differently. Like Mulder thought he guy had like really big teeth, and
Yeah.
Scully was like, no, he wasn't like that at all. He was nice. Yeah.
Yes. There's just so many. Yeah. Anyway.
It was great show. Great dynamic.
Okay. Are we ready to move on?
Sure.
Are we?
Yeah. Yeah,
You tell me.
I think we're good.
Lucy and Ethel. Okay. So I used to watch reruns of I Love Lucy, and I have to appreciate I Love Lucy because it's what gave Lucille Ball like the bulk of her money, which allowed her to be super powerful and actually push the studio to allow Star Trek. So like Lucille Ball is the queen of Trek. That's just the way it is. But the dynamic of Lucy and Ethel was just like very much the origin of like friendly slapstick best friends, right?
Yeah.
They had very different kind of lifestyles, right? But we're just like best friends and super fun and would get into the wildest of situations for no damn good reason. Like the chocolate factory or like just everything. Like just like all of the crazy schemes they would get into. And it's just fun. And at the end of it, everybody would just kind of laugh about it. But it very much reminds me of the dynamic between my mom and my sister. I'm just going to throw it out there because they will get into weird, goofy things and laugh about it afterwards.
I love that. I love that. They crack me up because they do get into the wildest situations.
And it's funnier because they're supposed to be like the average normal housewife.
Yes.
And they get in these crazy, really crazy situations.
Yeah. But that's part of what I liked about it. It's like this show was set like, 60s, 50s, something like that. And they were supposed to be just these average housewives, but they definitely were not, right?
Mm-mm.
And they pushed the envelope because, like, I think at one episode, Lucy dresses up as Superman or Ricky Jr. And then the real Superman actor shows up. But it's just, and saves her because she's stuck on a ledge, right? Like, it's just the things that they would do for the family or for each other were wild and insane. And she was a very physical actress, right? Very physically comedic. And it really kind of broke the mold from what was on TV at the time, right? In many ways, like her husband was this Cuban musician and was not this like businessman who was like very prim and proper. Like he played music in a nightclub, and that's their whole existence. And then she was like trying to be the perfect housewife, except she really sucked at it and was just this like really wild person. And I think that show gets overlooked a lot by men, not necessarily by women, as just like, oh yeah, just this goofy woman. It's like, no, there's more to it, right? There's an inclusivity to it.
I think it was it maybe the first time we actually see women being funny with each other, but not in the way that it had been done before. Like before you had like the Mary Tyler Moore Show, which was legitimately funny. It was a comedy, but never really like let her be funny. The circumstances around what she was doing at the office and stuff at home was funny. But like Lucy and Ethel like are legitimately funny together as friends, and like to a in the kind of humor that you'd only really see men do up until this point.
Yeah. They were funny When it was just the two of them too, which I really enjoy.
Yeah.
Because it's just the two of them on the screen and they're being funny.
Yeah. And it's these wild things, right?
Yeah.
Like dressing up a giant block of cheese as a baby to get through the airport, or like all these things that she just comes up with. And it's like very Three Stooges ish, right? But
Mhm.
it's a woman doing this. And I think from my perspective, it's like breaking gender norms. Very 60s, very like lightly breaking gender norms, but still breaking gender norms. And then like honestly, having a Cuban husband, like bringing in another ethnicity altogether. Um, the men were very much secondary. Yes.
Yeah, and I think
Um,
the fact that they were funny without their husbands and their connection wasn't related to their husbands. They were friends regardless of who their husbands were.
yeah,
And I
Yeah.
thought that was really important for the time.
it
Yes.
was. Um, and so it's not surprising to me that she decided to back Star Trek later on because it also broke a lot of societal norms, right? And Lucille Ball was all about that. And I just think that so much about it, like, really changed the expectation of comedy in general and sitcoms and society. Like, it definitely was pushing on that.
Oh,
Um,
it definitely pushed a lot of things. We get to see Lucy pregnant on screen,
That's
yeah,
and
true.
I don't know how much people now realize that that was huge.
did they share a bed too? Or am I
I'm
wrong?
not
I
sure if
don't
they actually
remember.
showed the bedrooms because
I don't
the Brady Bunch was later and they were still in separate. Or was the Brady Bunch the first that showed that? It was a weird time period where like they were just starting to do these things for the first time.
I,
Yeah,
The Brady Bunch might have been the first.
I
yeah,
know that I have
yeah.
talked to women who had children in the 50s and 60s, and you did not see that on television. It was very hard to find maternity wear at all, and the goal of everything was to not even let people realize that you were pregnant. Like, you were supposed to absolutely hide it. Um, I know, one woman who had a twin pregnancy and was put on a diet because she was gaining too much weight. Of course, at the time, they didn't know it was twins. But she and I cannot remember the diet she was on now, but just talking about how little she ate every day to just not show. And then at the end, how they definitely it became apparent that she was pregnant, and it was a problem because she worked at a school. And like yeah, you can't be pregnant. But there
Well,
was Lucy.
and she was making it look nice too. Like she was making
Yeah,
it look good. Like she's like, you
yeah,
don't have to dress up like your mom did when she
Yeah.
was pregnant with you. You could be pregnant. You could be fashionable, and you could
yeah.
still be on TV and still be funny with your best friend. And that was all like okay. And I thought that was big.
That was huge.
I also
Huge and
think too, and I
beautiful.
can't remember off the top of my head because it's been so long since I watched it, and I used to watch reruns when I was a kid. But if I remember correctly, there were some scenes that Lucy and Ethel had that were on the serious side.
Mhm.
Um, and they were able to balance out the comedy, so it wasn't just continuous slapstick. And so
Yeah.
you did get to see like the real friendship that was there between the two characters.
Yeah.
It really was just this amazing show. And in Hollywood at the time, for her to become as popular as she did and as powerful with Desilu Studios, and then like divorcing um her husband and taking control, and she ended up being in charge of things like I think Three's Company came out and it was under Desilu before Desilu got absorbed by Paramount. There was just like so many iconic shows that she was behind and backed,
Yeah.
that just kind of like changed the entire dynamic. Because if you remember Three's Company, like as a straight dude living with two women platonically, and that was like a big no-no, right? And the whole thing was like he had to act like he wasn't straight so that he could live with them. And this was like set in the 70s and 80s. Um, if you think back, like it hasn't been that long, and all these groundbreaking things are happening because of things like sitcoms, and a lot of that because of Lucille Ball.
Lucy and Ethel being an incredible duo.
Yeah.
Without Ethel, I don't think the show would have been
No, she needed
half
Oh
that
of what
no.
it was.
straight woman partner in crime.
Yeah.
Yes.
Just amazing thing.
And incredibly funny on her own too. The scenes
Yes.
between Ethel and her husband and stuff, like
Hilarious.
I mean, that just kind of spawned out of what she had with Lucy. It's just so funny.
They're
just perfect together.
both hilarious individually. I love them so much.
I mean, how can you not? And I think there's definitely parallels in female characters from that time period in like cartoons, very much, kind of Betty and Wilma-ish kind of mischief that happens. And you just see that throughout media going forward, right? Just like these funny women who are the lead characters of shows. And I think it really does come back down to that dynamic being so successful and people wanting to replicate it. Like, let's face it, when you are able to draw in stubborn society into something that's brand new and different and make money doing it, it really pushes the envelope, and that's so amazing. Okay. Are we ready to move on to our final duo?
Yes, I'm excited about
I
this
love
one.
them so much.
I mean,
Burnham and Tilly from Discovery.
just perfect.
I
in
love this
every way.
relationship. I love this relationship because I feel like I'm not sure, and somebody will have to come up with some other examples. Is there another relationship of two women who literally are like they're just supporting each other the whole way through? I mean, Tilly is a major reason why Burnham is able to get her act together and become the captain that she becomes. And then because of Burnham, Tilly is able to grow into this incredible educator. I mean, there's like no competition really between them. They're
No.
good friends. They support each other, and they support each other's goals, both their career goals, their relationship goals. Have we seen this before anywhere else?
I think Kira and Dax kind of had a similar, like, there's no competition between them. They just like really bonded, but the problem was it was under Berman's era, and they talked about men a lot.
Yeah,
which took away from the fact that these are two very powerful women. So we actually get to see that dynamic with these two without kind of like that sexist overlay.
I think of them, and I think of Troy and Crusher and how they were really, really good friends, but we missed out on so many opportunities in TNG for them to be better. And to be more like Burnham and Tilly. And these two did not start out as friends.
No.
I mean, their origins they were both kind of like, no.
I mean, I love that Tilly has
was
to
like, you're in my space. This is very strange for me.
Yeah.
Burnham's like, don't worry. I'm not saying we're not going to be friends. And to see that grow and evolve, and you get them just constantly supporting each other and constantly being like, I'm going to make you better. It's so beautiful. And I wish we got that with more female duos in Star Trek. This is what we could have had in Deep Space Nine and in TNG, and we didn't get.
Yeah, and I love like what you said about them not being friends in the beginning, because I think one of the things about this relationship that is so good is the fact that Tilly has to overcome so much prejudice with regards to Burnham, because she sees Michael as a criminal in the beginning a little bit. You know, she's like, you've done things that you're not supposed to do. Like, you've broken the law. Like, you defied the Starfleet regulations. This is my life. This is what I want to become. I want to be the best Starfleet officer. I want to be a command officer. I want to be captain. And everything Michael has done when she first meets her is the antithesis to that. And the fact that she's able to come around and see Michael for who she is and help Michael even realize who she is. I mean, Michael doesn't even believe in herself in the beginning. And so much of it's due to her relationship with Tilly.
But Tilly grounds her and gives her somebody who is just this like amazing pure friend that they develop this pure friendship and is so supportive. She needs that. She needs to remember that she is this amazing leader, and Tilly reminds her of that. And then she like wants to nurture Tilly's natural ability. I love that so much. And I cannot explain enough how much I hate Rick Berman for not giving us these dynamics sooner. And so when I get commentary from Trek Bros on somebody's comment section talking about nuance and how old Trek was better, I was like, no. And this is a good example of why.
But I think you're right. But also, it's not even just Star Trek. I mean, if you think about outside of Star Trek, thinking about other TV shows, how often do you see two women in a friendship where the friendship doesn't fall apart because of a man?
Oh my God.
I mean, it's really hard to think of.
They're not in competition with each other. There is no man that comes between them. They don't have to overcome that. They really don't talk about men at all, which is something that I absolutely adore with two females.
Actually, and isn't there a scene where they talk about, I can't remember if it's from Discovery or if it was in that Short Treks, but isn't there an episode where Tilly talks to Burnham about her mother? Like, she's concerned about calling her mom or speaking to her mom. And I remember when I saw that, I thought to myself, wow, that's a really adult woman conversation to call in your best friend to be like, I'm having mom issues, or like, I need to talk about my mom, or like, I mean, I'd never seen that before.
It was beautiful
before that episode.
They have just such a amazing friendship and a very vulnerable friendship where they do talk about, hey, these are my mommy issues. And they're just so supportive towards each other throughout the entire show. Once they become friends, they are so supportive of each other, even when that support takes Tilly away from Discovery. Burnham would never try and stop her from being the best that she could be. I love them so much. Not getting like 10 more seasons of Discovery and only getting, a handful of episodes each season feels criminal to me. It feels criminal. It feels criminal.
I also too, I love the fact that that they, I mean, it sounds a little cheesy to say they grow as characters with each other, but the fact that Tilly is able to see Michael's progression towards the captain's chair and through her realize this is not what I wanted. Like, I have spent my entire life trying to be this one person, and now I see my best friend become that person. I realize that's not me. That's not the person I am. That's not the path I'm meant to be on. And Michael then turning around and saying, I support you going in a different direction. And I will do what I have to do to make sure that you do what's best for you regardless. And that was a huge thing for me. As somebody who has changed their mind on what their path was in life, seeing Tilly go through that and then simultaneously have somebody there who supported her, who wasn't like, hey, you put so much work into this. You've done all the schooling. You've done all the work. You might as well just become the captain. You might as well just finish your commanding program. No, instead turn around and be like, hey, Tilly, follow your gut. You know what's right for you. That was groundbreaking, I felt.
Yeah.
It
It's so
shouldn't be.
healthy,
It
but
is.
it's so
is.
healthy
Perfect word for it. Yeah.
because you see like a healthy friendship and healthy love, but you also see healthy leadership, right?
Yeah.
So like you know, I've worked for a very long time. I've had great bosses, I've had horrible bosses, and the great bosses all have one thing in common, right? If you want to move on to something else, they support you 110%. It's not like, oh, okay, go ahead and do that. They enable you to do that,
Mhm.
and they give you the tools to help you reach that goal. Like my current boss, which I don't know if she listens to the podcast or not, but is just amazing at that, right? And I love to see that on screen because Michael, not just for Tilly, but for everybody in the crew once she becomes captain, is pushing them to do what they care about the most, right? So you see like her compassion and her caring for Tilly, but you also see she cares for the entire crew in a very similar way. And it's such a healthy way. And I'm going to sit here because I feel like I really need to say it. A lot of Trek bros will sit there and say, "Oh, I don't like Discovery because it's always Burnham crying about something." It's like, yeah, because she cares,
Oh my goodness.
right?
I
To
cannot
be honest, I
stand.
think Spock cries more in the original series than Burnham does
I
in
think
Discovery.
I
Kirk
And
think he does.
cries
I'm
more.
actually going to go through and do a rewatch, a cry
I was,
count, because I got a lot of crying comments on my last
Yeah.
video on TikTok. And so I'm actually going to
Wow.
go and do a rewatch of TOS, and I'm going to count every single time that Kirk and Spock cry. And then I'm going to watch Discovery and do the same thing for Burnham.
yeah, because she
Stay
doesn't cry
tuned.
that much.
She
She's
doesn't.
passionate.
It's just that those
She's
She
scenes
caring.
stand
has
out to us.
emotions, and that's wild. We can skip that. We don't need to see a
Right.
woman have emotions, but watching Kirk lose his shit um because he didn't get the girl at the end of the episode multiple times, that's cool. That's fine. We love
Yeah.
that. Yeah, no, you cannot tell me that Michael is too emotional for Star Trek when Spock literally mind melded with Kirk at the end of an episode and wiped his memory of an android he had
Yes.
just met, but was like
That's a podcast
crying
episode on
on
its
his
own.
desk over an android he just met.
Yeah.
Like,
We need the
I
cry
mean,
count. We need the cry count.
I'm working on it. Stay tuned.
yes,
But
we need a cry count.
But I think also too, the awesome thing about Burnham and Tilly is the fact that Tilly remains the optimism in the relationship. I mean, you could say she is the center of optimism for all of Discovery, but like for Burnham in particular, she keeps her positive outlook despite all the challenges they come through. Whereas, Burnham is a little more like Spock. She's a little more like serious. She's a little more like, well, this could end disastrously. And then Tilly is there to be like, hey, girl, it'll probably be okay. Like, there's some possibilities. There's some, percentages that end in our favor. And I think that's also a beautiful thing to see in Star Trek, a character who is eternally optimistic.
Yes.
Right. Playing around with views. No, you're right. Absolutely. Absolutely right.
I think they do make each other better, and that Tilly is able to see more gray areas after being so black and white at the beginning of the
Mhm.
story. She is this is white, this is black. There is no gray. And Burnham has gray. She has a lot of gray, and I think they both change each other in that, where Burnham does start looking for the this is absolutely white and black, and yes, I still have gray. But Tilly does realize and learn that a little bit of gray is necessary. Um, and I think that really helps her as she moves along her career path. They just make each other so much better. And I love it so much. They make me so happy.
And I'm hoping that the future of Star Trek adds more of this. I feel like we're seeing a little bit of it with Beckett Mariner and Devon Attendee in Lower
Yes.
Decks, that there's also a little bit of a Burnham Tilly vibe there. And I'm really
Yeah.
hoping that we see something similar in Academy when that comes out.
Yeah.
And, you know, they haven't really pushed too far in Strange New Worlds with that, but there is something there with Lon and Una. There is, we're building some kind of like woman friendship there that I think they're giving themselves a lot of an opportunity to build on. And so I really hope that the writers of all these projects realize that the Tilly Burnham relationship is very special, but it's also something that I feel like, at least I never saw that in film and TV as a kid. And I don't know, to the detriment of me being able to have long-term friendships with other women. I mean, I don't know. It's interesting.
It is. It is.
So I think
we don't get this type of dynamic really. And I struggled for the past week to try and come up with another. And I'm sure there has to be. And I would love somebody to send us an email or comment on our social media. Let us know where is the Burnham and Tilly, because I want to watch that show.
Because whenever I think of, okay, I'm thinking to other sci-fi, you know, women duos, but most of them, the hierarchy of the military situation that they're in, or the hierarchy of whatever's going on in the story, kind of supersedes the actual friendship. Whereas here, their Starfleet hierarchy does not come between their friendship, and I think that's what makes it very different.
Yeah, doesn't interfere at all. I love that.
Yeah.
So yeah, if somebody else can think of somebody, I would love to hear it as well. Yeah.
Send us an email at anotherfrackenpodcast@gmail.com.
Yes. Are we done?
Joseph will check the email, probably, not me.
I might check the email. I try to remember.
One of us will eventually check the email.
I'll hear about it in the group chat.
It'll be fine.
We'll at you. It's fine.
This was a fun episode. I liked it. I hope everybody else liked it. These were some interesting characters. And now I've learned a few things. I have to go read some books, catch up.
I'm gonna hound you on that, by the way. I just want you to know this.
Stay tuned to my TikTok videos where I break down every chapter of The Hobbit.
Oh my goodness. I'm
excited for that, by the way. Okay. Next time, we will be talking about season 3 of Picard.
I am so excited for this.
Dun, dun, dun.
And
it's going to be amazing.
Yes.
Amazing for some people.
Controversial for others.
Maybe not for the Trek bros out there.
I do feel like we might need to give like content warning.
We all have very strong feelings about season 3 of Star Trek Picard. And I have a great conspiracy theory about it, which I will share.
I'm excited.
I can't wait.
I'm excited for this. This is going to be amazing.
So
I cannot wait.
Okay. I'll be rewatching it and taking some serious notes.
Yes, I'll get out my Post-its.
I'm definitely going to take some notes. Okay. That concludes Dynamic Duos. We're so glad you tagged along. Please give us a like and subscribe and share if you haven't already. Share with your friends, share with your family, share with your enemies. It's totally fine. We want hate comments too. It's all good. Thank you, everybody, for joining us.
Going out to explore. Tune in comes to another fracking podcast. Time travel, wormholes, and more. Chevron's locked on another fracking podcast. Debating all the lore. We get signal of another fracking podcast. Nerdy topics galore. systems go for another frackin' podcast.